I'm guessing you didn't find that wraith.
Oh no, we did. But then we found 13 others, didn't we, George? Total cluster case.
Hello and welcome to Haunting the Narrative, or as this episode will probably become known, the Lizzie and Qiqi Show.
Woo! Best episode yet!
Today, Qiqi, or Nat, as she's sometimes known, Natasha, what else are we... Qiqi? I can't pronounce it correctly, so...
Qiqi?
Yeah, no, I'm not even going to try. I'm just embarrassed myself. All right, today, Qiqi and I are here to talk about... literal hauntings in the narrative. Just wanted to get that roll credits line out real quick this time. So we're discussing ghosts, hauntings. We'll talk about how they work. We'll talk about some of the different kinds of ghosts. And we'll walk through some of the hauntings from the books and what they tell us. So let's start with hauntings and how they work. Because especially people who haven't read the books may not know some of the more technical details. And even people who have read the books maybe didn't care unless they're like us and are obsessive and or have tried to write a case fic that includes haunting.
Compared it with what happens in the books and things like that. But I found out, like months and months into this fandom, that there are people who read these books and they don't read the glossary at the back.
Oh, yeah, big mistake. The glossary's great.
Like, what is wrong with them?
There's fun stuff.
It's one of my favourite bits. Like, you get to the end of the book and like, yay, now it's the glossary time. And there are people who just skip that.
They're not obsessives like us.
No, it's not obsessive. It's knowledge. Knowledge is power.
Curiosity.
Exactly.
Yes, we are naturally curious people.
And all of this scientific knowledge about things that are completely and utterly made up is very important to have.
Absolutely. We must have a thorough knowledge of all things hauntings and manifestations. All right.
All right. Anyway, so here are the signs of a manifestation. The first thing that normally kicks in is it starts to get a bit nippy.
Yeah, it's officially called chill. Ghost chill, I think, oftentimes. And I think people mostly know this one because in the show, you know, George has like the temperature gauge, and it's a really obvious, easy way for them to show that the manifestation is beginning is showing the temperature dropping.
I love the beeps.
Yeah.
I love that they had a thermometer that beeped with each degree it went down, and it really felt creepy.
It feels like a literal, you know, ticking bomb under the table that you're waiting for it to go off. That's a rhetorical device, but or not a rhetorical device, a literary device, the ticking bomb under the table. In this case, it is the ghost that will be appearing imminently.
I do kind of wonder, like, what do they use for thermometers in the books, though? So they say thermometers, but then they say you can't rely too much on electrical things because electrical stuff can, you know, it can be interfered with. So are they, like, walking around with mercury thermometers?
Maybe. Why not? Why wouldn't you have a mercury thermometer? That seems very logical.
Like a divining rod? Does it work like that though? Can you just walk around with it?
Yeah, why not? I guess you can't shake it, but you could walk gently.
You can't shake them?
If you shake it, like that's how you prep a mercury thermometer. You shake it so that the mercury goes down to the bottom so that you then get an accurate reading. If you watch any really old TV, maybe like Ferris Bueller's Day Off is old enough where maybe they should like shake the thermometer. Yeah. I think by the time we were kids, right, it was not mercury because by then they knew that was a bad idea. And most thermometers had that red liquid in it, which is not mercury. It's something else.
Oh, that's not mercury.
No, it's something non-toxic.
I don't know why I never realized it's not mercury because, mercury is silver.
Yep. Anyways, they could have little electric temperature gauges. And then if they go on the fritz, you also learn something.
Yeah.
The problem with an analog thermometer is they change very slowly. Like they're walking around, like Aikmir's, for example, they walk around taking a temperature map. That would take ages if you're using an analog thermometer. So
the electronic ones that they use in the show.
Yeah. There's a lot of technology advancements that happen in the problem Britain. So maybe they've come up with something really clever and we just don't know what it is.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, getting accurate temperature readings would be kind of a matter of priority, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah.
So, yeah. There we go. We've got some divergence from the real time. Yeah. In addition to the divergence of all the ghost things. Anyway, another sign of a manifestation or a pending manifestation is miasma.
All right, so
Miasma? Miasma?
I pronounce it miasma. I don't know if that's right. I'm one of those people who learns most of my vocabulary from reading, so who knows? Miasma and malaise, because I always get these two confused. I don't know if you do. Which one is which?
So malaise in the real world means that you feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
And miasma is, in anime, it's that black aura that smells bad, and that's like the sign of something evil. It's a feeling.
I think of it as like a noxious gas or a noxious fume. You get this miasma coming off of like a swamp in the summer.
Yes, they used to think that miasma caused the Black Plague.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Yeah.
That's why you're supposed to go to the seaside for that fresh, salty air.
Well, I mean, the rats don't swim, so.
Now you've got me wondering if you can escape ghosts by going to the seaside and that fresh, salty air. I bet there's a lot less hauntings at the seaside.
It would make sense.
Oh.
It would make sense.
So anyways, miasma is that it's mostly is it a scent or is it a taste? Like they get it on their tongue and they start chewing gum to kind of get rid of it.
Smell and taste are very closely linked, aren't they?
Yeah.
So.
Bit of both.
Bit of both. You can smell it in the air. It's also the air starts to feel thick.
Do you think miasma is psychic or is it real? Like, could anybody pick up the miasma? Because anyone can feel the chill. It's a physical manifestation. Is the miasma the same way? Do you have to have talent?
I don't know. You know, they never really mention that. But they do. Sometimes it's a report of a bad smell or something in an area, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's some of the client reports that they get. But things like the malaise, because malaise is when you just start to feel heavy and sad and, you know, a bit depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Even the adults and stuff will feel that as well.
Yeah.
So.
Even though it's clearly kind of psychic. So, yeah, hard to say.
But they don't lose all of their psychic abilities, do they? Because,
No.
like, Barnes can see skull in the jar.
Yeah, enough.
Or he senses it or something. He knows that and he can see it or sense it through the silver glass.
Well, and Kipps gives that whole speech about creeping fear is our next one. He gives that whole speech about still being able to feel the fear and not being able to see what he's fighting and how sometimes the fear just takes over and there's nothing he can do about it and he's kind of ashamed of it and feels a bit useless. Poor man.
Poor baby pathetic Catman.
Exactly. All right, so those are listed in the glossary as the 4 main signs of a manifestation that is like beginning or...
Imminent. That's the word. Imminent.
Imminent, yeah. Chill, miasma, malaise, and creeping fear. And then we have the apparitions themselves. And an apparition is just the form that the ghost takes. And there's a lot of different forms that ghost takes. Some can be quite unusual. And so this is directly out of the glossary because I thought this was fun. And if people are not reading the glossary, then I want to give them this because this is fun. The specter in the recent Limehouse Docks case manifested as a greenly glowing king cobra, while the infamous Bell Street horror took the guise of a patchwork doll.
Ooh.
Powerful or weak, most ghosts do not or cannot alter their appearance. We do know of at least one ghost who can really notably alter their appearance, and that's the Fetch.
Can it? Oh, yeah.
Turns into Lockwood. It turns into Ned Shaw. It turns into somebody from Flo's past. We don't know who.
Skull moves his plasma around.
Oh, God.
Creates different shapes, doesn't he?
Oh, I mean, yes. Skull does the happy farmhand and all of that. He makes faces. He makes horrible faces at Holly to try to scare her.
Okay, but I think that altering their appearance seems to be linked to how sentient they are.
Quite possibly. The Fetch is very sentient, and obviously Skull is as well. Maybe you have to have a certain amount of, like, conscious control.
You have to have a certain amount of awareness that you're a ghost and that you're facing somebody who's not a ghost.
Yeah.
And that you've got this kind of ability over them or something like that. I think you need to be aware in order to start messing around with your plasm.
And then there's one other thing which is in the glossary, and I guess it's talked about a little bit, but maybe we don't think of it as like a part of the manifestation, which is a ghost's aura. They glow with that sort of other light, the light from the other side. And then this is different from a death glow, I think.
Yeah. It's different to a death glow.
The aura is there with the apparition.
Yeah.
Whereas a death glow is not necessarily linked to an apparition at all.
No.
So what do we know about death glows?
So death glows that we know, death glows are generally left behind by nasty deaths. Not always, but generally left behind by nasty deaths.
That poor squirrel.
Yeah, that poor squirrel is a vole, wasn't it? Wait, is it a squirrel in the American one?
Some small furry creature from the very beginning of the very first book that Lockwood sees.
Yeah. Underneath the bush outside. Death glow in the garden. Well, death glows, they do fade over time because Annie Ward's death glow was very weak. It was very faint. And it took him a while to notice it. He didn't notice it straight away. They are a type of energy in themselves because Jessica's death glow ends up helping.
Right.
But whatever type of energy they are, they're not a type of energy that Lucy can pick up on very well. Because she can't see them. She normally can't even sense them.
Yeah.
So Jessica's is particularly strong and she can sense that. And she said she can see it out of the corner of her eye, but not very clearly, right?
Yeah.
But she can definitely sense it. It's a very, very, very strong death glow. But normally, death glows aren't that strong.
Well, she doesn't really connect to the other side visually. She does it through touch. And she does later, right? She touches the bed and she gets a lot. So I think that, if we think of a death glow as being both a kind of a memory, a psychic memory that's imprinted on the space, and perhaps a little bit of a weak spot in the fabric of reality that gives you more of a connection to the other side. But that makes me wonder then, what's on the other side? Because they go through and there's nothing there. This is not seeing something that's on the other side. This is definitely something that's on this side. It is an impression that's been left.
Yeah, I think when you say it's an impression or a memory, I think you've sort of got it on the head there.
Yeah.
I tend to think, and I'm hearing Mairead's voice in the back of my head saying, can't things just be supernatural? But I do think that emotions are a type of psychical energy, and the memory, leaves that there. Because we're talking about all these apparitions and, the chill miasma, all of that, but we haven't talked about Lucy's touch or her listening, the sounds. And what I always find very interesting about the sounds that she hears is she often says it feels like it's coming from the other end of a very long telephone wire, or from very far away, or from very long ago. And she consistently says that the sounds are kind of reaching over the ears towards me. And it feels like it's lingering memory, isn't it? It's emotion. Because I do think Lucy's main talent is actually not her listening. It's not her touch. It's the emotional, the psychic connections that she makes with ghosts that she gets through listening and touch, but it's actually being able to make that connection that makes her so valuable.
Well, now I'll channel Mairead and say, what is memory but not traveling to the past?
She will love that, and then we're going to have a 2-hour monologue.
She's going to send us a very long DM. That's fine.
But it's going to be beautiful. I know it's going to be beautiful.
So I would maybe not say it in those exact words or at all. I'm sorry, Lizzie. I know you're joking, but I'm a pedant. You know this about me and I can't help myself. Memory is a cognitive phenomenon, and I would never describe it as journeying to the past. If I were to use an analogy for memory, it would be more like rereading the past, like a book. And the thing about rereading is that our interpretations always change with our current circumstances. It's never traveling to the past, it's more like bringing the past forward and interweaving it with our present, and the memory is actually then changed by that present, by who we are in the moment when we remember it. So yeah, memory shapes identity, but it's a two-way street, because identity also shapes memory. So in that respect, ghosts aren't really like a memory to me because they don't change. That's what's so unnatural and unlifelike about them, and about death itself, is that once you die, you stop changing. Although actually, I suppose that then brings me to the skull, who is an exception to the rule. He does arguably change after death, he has this whole redemption arc. So do I have to change my definition, or am I going to argue that the skull is not fully dead? I mean, the technical definition of death from a theological perspective is the separation of the body and the spirit, and arguably the skull, his spirit, is still hanging around part of his body, so it's not fully separated. Anyway, yeah, I can't remember the original point, but pedantry, tangents, you're welcome. Did you miss me?
But touch as well. Touch, it feels like the memory was left in that place, and if you've got touch, you're sort of finding the memory. So maybe it's maybe death glows are just kind of a visual form of touch?
Yeah, I think so. I think they share a lot of characteristics in common, certainly mechanically, the way that Stroud writes them. So speaking of seeing the past, can ghosts see the future?
Ooh, isn't that fun? Ghosts in time, it's all messed up.
So the fetch claims to be able to see the future. And the fetch is not reliable. Like, we do not necessarily believe them.
Yeah.
In fact, we're very much rooting for Lucy not to believe the fetch when it says it's showing her the future. But then George gets in there with like, well, theoretically, sure, why not? And the skull is like, yeah, sure, why not? Because it's the skull.
And then we find out in the creeping shadow that time is hinky on the other side.
Yes.
We see Lockwood and Lucy on the green as apparitions while they're still sitting in the living room at the inn. Is it the living room?
Yeah, that's right. You do.
Yeah.
It's so weird. You really want to get me started on like, well, maybe it's the concentration of energy is exerting a kind of similar to gravity can warp time, but I'm not going to. Even though Mairead's not here to shoot me, she might hunt me down. So
maybe as we get further on into this episode, we start talking about concentrating energy. You know, you might be able to link that back in, and you may not be able to resist the pull then. And I'm looking forward to it.
We'll see.
But also, you mentioned the fetch seeing the future. La Belle Dame also predicts the future, and her predictions are correct.
That's right. He will go into the dark for you, for her.
For you, yeah, he will go into the dark for you. And of course, Lucy thinks she's referring to Lockwood, but she's referring to Skull.
Yep.
Which makes sense. The Skull is with her.
Yeah.
So that was correct.
It's interesting that La Belle Dame can apparently operate that coin-operated machine.
Isn't it? Like, they're not supposed to do that because unless they're a poltergeist or a type 3, they don't have telekinesis. They've got the spectral wind thing that they can just blow things around the place, which I think that would be a kind of cool power to have. I'm sorry. I just like the idea that I get mad at someone and then everything breaks. That would be fun.
We're so happy you don't have that power.
Well, the fact that I'm an adult and I'd have to do my own cleanup kind of nixes my desire to use that.
Oh, that's a good point.
But I think it's cool. I just think it's cool when like people sing on TV or something and then their hair all lifts up and blows in the wind. I'm revealing far too much.
I think it's interesting that you want this power to destroy things. I actually want the power to like be able to just stand in the middle of the room and put everything away.
Yeah, but you can't control it. That's the thing with spectral wind. You can't. You could push it all to the edges of the room.
That's not what I want. I want Merlin's ability to pack with the wave of a wand and a song.
Yeah. Bibbity bobbity boo.
No, it's Alakazam.
Bibbity bobbity.
Oh, that is Bibbity Bobbity Boo.
Yeah.
No, the one from the Sword and the Stone.
I don't remember that one.
Higgidus Piggidus something poke. Oh, I'm gonna have to look it up. I'll sing it for you later.
Disney really went through a phase where they didn't like real words.
All right, we've gone way far afield. We're supposed to be talking about ghost powers, the powers that ghosts have.
Yes.
Seeing the future, spectral wind. But we managed to skip over like the main two ghost powers that everybody knows about. Ghost touch and ghost lock. One thing I find interesting, these are the main two powers that we see in the books and in the show, and they made changes to both of them for the show. Ghost touch, obviously, it was just like very, very cold, and it could kill you, and it could kill you eventually. It was a little bit like gangrene almost is the way that it's described, and like it could make necrotic tissue and get to you, but it wasn't just like instant death most of the time, unless you got touched right in the heart.
I'm funny with ghost touch. I don't think it's necessarily a touch to the heart that does it. I think it's intent.
Oh, like it doesn't matter where they touch you, it depends on how much they wanted to kill you?
Yeah, basically, because Annabelle Ward killed Fairfax in like a second, right? He was dead before he hit the ground. And also what ghost touch does is it makes your body turn blue and swell up. Barnes was saying, go and get that armor off him before we have to cut it off him or something like that. But in the Hollow Boy at the parade, a ghost literally drifts through a woman entirely, bodily. Her entire body goes through a woman's entire body. That woman obviously hits the floor and starts the dying process, but she's not dead. And Holly actually revives her.
Yeah, with the adrenaline shot. I do think, though, that ghost touch is very similar to, like, frostbite.
Yeah.
Right? It can lead to gangrenous necrotic tissue. It leads to the swelling and the blue and all of that. The intent thing is interesting because there are some type 1s. There's, like, a gray haze, I think it's called, that if you walk through it, you're fine. It doesn't do anything to you.
Yeah.
It just kind of, like, hangs out there and is cold. and creepy.
There's like a babbling mist or something that's similar too, isn't it?
Gibbering mist. Yeah, I think a lot of the type 1s, they have no intent. They have no awareness. They don't even know you're there. And they're very unlikely to kill you or to ghost touch you at all. So I do think you have something there with the intent.
Woo.
Also, they talk about like type 2s that are really hungry and aggressive and attracted to like the warmth and the life force. Like if they're trying to suck the life force out of you, maybe they can do it a lot faster than something that's just like, oh, you're kind of warm and kind of tasty and let me take a nibble.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing between a type 1 and a type 2 is what is supposed to differentiate them is intent. It's not necessarily how dangerous they are, how much they want to kill you. It's intent. Like if a ghost, was it Pliny? I think the Greek philosopher, the Roman philosopher, who bought a haunted
Pliny
house.
the Elder?
What's his name?
Pliny the Elder?
Pliny the Elder. See, I've never heard anybody say that. But it would be Pliny because it's Latin.
I don't know. That's just how I've heard it pronounced on another podcast.
And I'm going with Pliny. I'm sorry. I like that better.
All right, go for it.
Oh, we're making it up. I'm taking a page out of Disney's book. So, Pliny the Elder was all higgledy-piggledy because he bought a house in Rome that was haunted, and that was not very bibbity-bobbity of him. The ghost turned up at his bedside and said, hey, look, there's a hole in my roof. I'm getting water on my head. Fix up and I'll stop haunting your house. And so he went and fixed up the grave and all was good. But Lucy says this shows a classic type 2 because the ghost had intent. The intent was not to murder anyone. The intent was to get his grave fixed. But he had a reason. It seems, again, emotions are psychical energy, all of this mind over matter stuff. Anyway, so that's ghost touch. Ghost lock. Kind of robs a person of their intent in a way, doesn't it?
Ghost lock is the thing where you can't get into the source unless you find the ghost key and insert it into the ghost lock, right?
Exactly. That is exactly it. Episode's over. Off we go.
No, I'm sorry. Yes, ghost lock is they take away your agency and your ability to manifest your intent.
But it's very creepy. I was going to say it's creepy. No, it's very subtle. That's what I want. It's very subtle how they do it. Because it's sort of, you know, they take whatever you're actually thinking about and they just kind of make you a bit sadder. Like almost like, you know, you're washing the dishes and everything's perfectly normal, but then a sad song comes on the radio and suddenly you're remembering your boyfriend from 20 years ago who you never spoke to again, and you just never got closure on that. And sometimes you sit there and you wonder what if.
Sitting there regretting not being closer to your 6 sisters. Why don't you talk to them more? Why don't you call them?
You know,
why do they never call you? Now I'm sad.
And the thing is that this is just such a natural kind of thought progression. Every so often we all get the attacks of the sad, unless you're trained to spot it.
That's a very deliberate choice, right? To make it very, sorry, I'm getting a little bit meta here, but like when you're writing this kind of thing, you have to write it in a way that people are going to connect with it and understand it. So it makes sense that this is something we've all experienced, that kind of emotional weight that feels like it's dragging you down. And it's hard to move. It's hard to want to get out of bed. Yeah, and that's what ghost lock is.
Instant depression.
Yeah, ghost lock is just a very severe form of depression. I mean, of course they're depressed. They're dead.
But the way they make you depressed, I think, is quite impressive, frankly. Lucy says in The Screaming Staircase, she says, you know, an ordinary person, when it's very, very strong ghost lock, like Annie Ward used on her, would just stand there, basically, and let themselves be ghost touched, because they'd just lose all will to do anything about it. Like in A Screaming Staircase as well, at the end of that, she gets hit with a very, very strong ghost lock, which makes her go, yeah, I was always destined to jump in the well anyway. I might as well, why bother fighting fate? And she actually goes to do it. Everything, all of her intent, all of her feelings, everything's just been sapped out of her. And I find it very interesting. I find it very cool. I think it is such a cool thing.
Yeah. It's really nice to have that complementing some of the other ghostly powers. Like ghost touch is very aggressive. It's very physical. To have this other much more psychical, much kind of heavier, sadder side to it, which makes so much sense with, again, them being dead and her connecting with the ghost so strongly that she would feel these feelings that the ghosts are sort of emanating at her.
What's interesting also is that ghost lock is obviously a type of psychic connection because they worm into the thoughts that you are having now, right? So they're connected to it and they kind of direct them in the way that they want you to be feeling sad. It's probably not quite as aware as conscious as that, but so there's a type of psychic connection that forms the ghost lock, and it's entirely controlled by the ghost.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit when we walk through some of the hauntings and the different ways that we see that in the books. We see both the psychic connection and specifically ghost lock.
This is obviously very different to ghost lock in the show.
No, in the show, you're right. They stay ghost locked forever. They never come out of it. We do see them. George and Lucy are like being ghost locked, but then it gets interrupted. There's a sense there that anybody who's like fully ghost locked will never come out of it.
But their eyes go all filmy as well. And then Lucy gets ghost locked and her eyes go filmy, but she goes to jump in the well instead of just standing there with her mouth open. So it makes no sense in the show. I don't like ghost lock in the show.
I think it's one of those things. They just didn't really have the time to get into it enough. And so it's like we're trying to fill in the gaps with what we know from the book, and it doesn't quite fit, and it makes it hard to say really what's going on in the show. So let's stick with the books.
I don't know, like when we're talking about the show and ghost lock, it's kind of like they dumbed down ghost touch because it would make no sense or the stakes weren't high enough, but then they did something with ghost lock. What the hell? We'll
talk about that when we talk about season 2, because they have said that they were trying to set something up there, and we can speculate as to what exactly it was.
Lizzie is not using the royal we there. She just means I.
Yeah. There will be other people on the podcast that day. I'm just not going to let them get a word in edgewise because I just want to go on and on about season 2. All right, but let's talk more about ghost powers. So there's a thing that La Belle Dame does that is not ghost locked. They call it enchainment. What is that?
Enchainment. So enchainment is kind of when a ghost basically possesses you in a way.
Mm.
But rather than a full-on possession, it's like they sap your will, almost like it is a ghost lock, but it's a ghost lock that's persistent over the distance. And it is connected to the ghost itself. So you seal the source, you end the enchainment. But even during the middle of the day, when ghosts are not active, when they can't manifest on this side of the veil, the enchainment will persist, providing the source has not been sealed.
Right, so we see that with Charlie Budd, that La Belle Dame has managed to enchain. He's gone crazy. He's like an animal. He just wants
to kill himself.
He's like an animal in pain, I think they say. Yeah.
He just wants to kill himself.
He wants to die.
Which makes sense because she really doesn't like men, does she?
Now I'm trying to remember if this is what's in the book or this was my fic version of it, my adaptation version of it. It's like she wanted to have control over men, it seemed like. She was a manipulator, an actress. She wanted to be able to make them bend to her will.
In the books, no. In the books, she's basically just going around killing all the men, really.
Does she do that in life? She kills the men? Or is she seducing them and then tossing them to the side?
She seduced them and tossed them to the side. So I think she had a lot of disdain.
This is my interpretation, is that she wanted control. She wanted power over men. And so this is now her ghostly version of that.
Makes sense. But whatever she's doing anyway, that is what enchainment is. But we also see it beforehand.
When?
First off, if we're going to go with enchainment as kind of like an extended form of ghost lock, then like I just said, ghost lock is a form of psychic connection that's entirely controlled by the ghost. Normally it's only an agent who's been trained to spot it, realises they're ghost locked, then they can shake it off. And I always find it interesting that in the books, Lockwood always shakes off ghost lock first. If all three of them have been ghost locked, Lockwood shakes it off first every single time because his psychic connections are really weak. He can't make the connection. He doesn't have that type of talent. In this case, it's kind of like it's a bonus for him. Yet he gets enchained. La Belle Dame does enchain him, doesn't she?
She does. She hits him where he's most vulnerable, though.
Yeah, he's like, Lucy, come here. Because he follows. Whatever vision of Lucy was walking through there, getting him to follow her, I would have loved to see that on screen, but I get this feeling that the TV show might have turned that into Jessica or someone, which is just boring. I want to see Lucy in a bikini, come on.
No, I wanted to see Ruby Stokes playing La Belle Dame. I think that would have been amazing.
Right? That would have been so cool. And then also see Ruby Stokes running herself through with a rapier.
Oh well. Look, that's what happens when there's an evil version of you. You chop off its head.
Anyway, going back to this, as I said, enchainment TG La Belle Dame is not the first example that we see. The first example that we see, I think, is Annie Ward.
Really?
Well, she's exerting that type of control over Lucy. Why does Lucy take the source?
Good point. Curiosity.
It's not curiosity. She doesn't have that kind of curiosity at that point. But for some reason, she sees it, she feels sorry for her, she takes it. And then Lockwood locks it away. Lucy takes it. Lockwood locks it away. Lucy takes it. She keeps taking the saws.
Oh, that's interesting.
She develops this obsession over it.
I don't know if I would classify that as enchainment. I feel like enchainment is implying a level of control by the ghost that I don't think is really happening here.
Yeah, that's not really happening here, but I think it's a flavour of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of on the same spectrum.
On the same spectrum of that sort of psychic connection. Lucy's making that connection for the first time, and she's like, what? She's curious about it, but also she's drawn to it in a way.
But also that connection is in charge, not Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
The second time we see enchainment, we see it more vividly, and that is Joplin, who's enchained by Bickerstaff, not the mirror.
Oh, you think so?
I think so, because the mirror would not cause him to drag Bickerstaff's corpse down into the catacombs and set up the experiment exactly as Bickerstaff set it up.
I thought that was just Joplin's natural proclivity towards, I don't know, over-dramatic ritualization.
No, I don't think so. What did Lucy say? Lucy said that Bickerstaff's voice, it was saying, look, look, and she really wanted to look. Especially in the graveyard. And all the time down with the mirror as well, until she started to get annoyed. I love this about Lucy. Eventually she just gets annoyed and says, I don't care. Go away. Shades, line up one by one, and then I'll listen to you. You know?
And they kind of do.
She gets annoyed and then they do, yeah. Once she starts forcing it from her side, they fall in line. But, yeah, Joplin is definitely enchaining. Joplin is definitely being enchained, by Bickerstaff. So that's another bigger example we see. And then I kind of wonder if the skull isn't exerting that kind of influence over Lucy for a while.
I've wondered that too. How much influence does the skull have over Lucy, especially in The Hollow Boy, when the skull is the one who's kind of pushing Lucy to recognize her feelings and actually, trying to drive that dividing wedge between her and Lockwood, her and Holly, trying to encourage her worst tendencies, really. Like, she has this conversation with Skull and then she quits. How much of that is her? How much of that is Skull? How much of that is the connection?
So the thing also is, Lucy was very careful, wasn't she? She said, I don't want him around me that much because I'll be influenced by it. You get influenced by ghosts. That's what she was worried about, because they exert this negative influence on you.
Yeah.
She was right. They do. Again, I think it's the same spectrum as enchainment.
But then when we see her 4 months later, she's actually much stronger in her ability to make those connections and to control them.
Yeah, and I do think part of that is because Skull stopped trying to control her, and that kind of gave her the ability to control their connection more.
Oh.
Because Skull just started feeling sorry for her because she went into her pathetic sad girl phase. And he was like, I wanted this, but not like this.
Right, he got everything he wanted, and then, of course, that turned into empathy and feelings. Yuck.
Yeah.
For him and for,
Exactly.
Right, so when we see her in the Emma Marchment case, she's starting to kind of control that connection, right? She's trying to reach out to the ghost. She's trying to kind of grab a bit of that ghost and like, come here, I want to mess with you.
Yes, exactly. And she's not starting to, she's 100% doing it. I really like to contrast Emma Marchment with the armchair money ghost from the beginning of The Hollow Boy. Because that one, she just sits there with no defenses, nothing. She just opens her mind.
Right.
Like, tell me, and she waits for the connection.
Terrifyingly.
Luckily, it's just an old man who wants to, like, pass on money to his heirs. But she puts herself at an awful lot of risk there. And that's kind of just what she's been doing the whole time. She's just been opening her mind, like with the veiled lady ghost next, when she opens up her mind to it. She sees and feels what the veiled woman wants her to see and feel, whereas Lockwood is looking at her face and saying, hey, what you're saying or what I'm seeing are not matching up. So this connection's entirely being controlled by the ghost, and she's letting it happen. By the time it's Emma Marchment, Lucy is in control of the connection. Emma Marchment's not trying to make a connection with her, and Lucy goes into it with touch, and Emma Marchment is not happy that Lucy has formed that connection, is she?
No.
She doesn't seem to realise Lucy's there in her mind until she looks up and sees her. Yeah. She's not pleased, and Lucy is very much in control of all of the connections she makes with the ghosts after that.
Well, so then there's one more really famous example, actually, of enchainment in the books, and that's Marissa.
Yep, 100%. And I think that's what all of these things are building up to.
Yeah, and then Lucy, she sees Marissa, and she immediately has that vision of La Belle Dame and the chain to Charlie Budd, and she kind of has, and it's not explicit, but it's definitely implied there that Ezekiel has this power over Marissa, that he's enchained her from a very young age, and that she's really not in control at all. And Lucy looks at that and is like, no, I don't want that.
I don't think she's not in control at all, but she's been influenced very heavily.
Sure.
Very heavily all the time. So, like, how much...
How much is her? How much is Ezekiel? It's unclear.
It's unclear, yeah. Like, who's the slave to who? Who's serving who? Who's protecting who? It's so unclear.
All right, we will get much more, I think, into Lucy and Skull's connection in an entirely different episode. Otherwise, we're going to be at this for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So let's rewind a little bit and talk about ghost types. So the different types of ghost. Introduced in the show, I think they mention all of the types 1, 2, and 3, but I don't think we ever see a type 1. We see, obviously, Skull, type 3, fully intelligent, fully self-aware, able to hold a conversation, totally aware that he's a ghost, that they're alive, knows things about the other side, all of that.
And also, Skull has telekinesis once he's let out. That's the other thing, because they can move things around, can't they?
I think type 3s have all of the abilities, actually, because we see them use telekinesis, we see them use spectral wind, we see them use enchainment, we know they can ghost touch and ghost lock. That's pretty much everything.
Yeah, that's everything.
I think type 3s are able to use all the abilities.
Yeah, they can change their appearance and stuff as well, can't
Yeah,
they?
absolutely.
Because Ezekiel's doing his glowing alien act.
And Skull is making inappropriately rude gestures. Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. Which, again, like, goes back to what I said. I think it's because of the awareness. Because type 1s, they're just not aware of anything, are they?
No, type 1s have no idea what's going on. They're mindless. They follow a set pattern. There's like stone knockers that are literally just tapping on your walls. There's the hazes and the gibbering mist that are just sound or just visual. They often are accompanied by one of the manifestations, the type 1s, either chill or miasma or malaise. And I think they're kind of named based on both how they look and what manifestations they come with.
Which makes me wonder if the chill, miasma and malaise isn't just kind of a byproduct of splitting the veil.
Yeah, and actually that explains why it's more of a physical manifestation as well. Yep, I totally agree with that.
Type 1s to me, they're kind of like your... Let me see, like, we're going to rewind back to when we were about 19 years old here, but they're like your bestie who's just been dumped after a breakup. All she does all day is she sits in bed and sobs. She calls you up. She goes over the same thing every time, okay? Like, it's a 2-hour conversation. She's not saying anything new. And then, like, when she's not on the phone to you, she's just calling him repeatedly over and over and over until somebody says, hey, you can't live like this. And then for about 10 minutes, you are the worst person on earth and she hates you. And why are you so mean to her? And then she just falls right back into that depressionness. That is a type 1.
That's the cold maiden from book 2.
Without the phone.
Book 3? Book 2. Yep, exactly.
Book 2 they've got on, yeah. That's the kind of a type 1. They're obsessed with whatever their pain or their hurt is. They're not really aware of the outside world, but they can also ghost touch you. They can still be deadly, and they can notice you.
Mm-hmm. It is possible. It's just less likely. It's more rare.
George has to jump in the canal to get away from one at some point, doesn't he? Because he just didn't notice it, but the ghost noticed him, and once he noticed him, it's like he forgot all of the breakup depression and went, ooh, nice warm person, and starts wandering over.
All right, so then there's type 2s. Type 2s seem to exist on a spectrum, from between type 1 all the way up to nearly a type 3. They're more aware, they have greater intent, but sometimes they're just on a death loop too. Sometimes they're just, even Annabelle Ward is reciting her death loop and...
No, she's not. We should talk about Annabelle Ward last, actually. Let's get back to Annabelle Ward. Let's go with the Shining Boy in the Creeping Shadow.
Oh yeah, the Shining Boy is a type 2, right? Isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, and he's reenacting his death loop until the old man, he's a vicar, isn't he? Or a reverend, I don't know, something. The old man steps over the chains and then his presence is known. As soon as he notices his presence, he stops the death loop and he It's like, ooh, nice warm person.
Yep. And then they have to go save Granddad Skinner.
Yeah.
Who doesn't even know he's been saved.
They break his boat in a bottle. I would have been furious if I was a granddad, I have to say. No, but he made that with his great-granddad or something, didn't he? It's like 90 years old. It was tragic.
Yes, that is tragic. They should have saved the bottle and let the old man die.
I mean, the old man wouldn't have complained if that had been the case.
That's true. The problem is if the bottle breaks and he dies, now you're getting haunted. But I think a lot of people think that type 2s are more aggressive. This is what's in the glossary about them. Many are neutral or benign in their dealings with the living, perhaps returning to reveal a secret or make right an ancient wrong. Some, however, are actively hostile and hungry for human contact. These ghosts should be avoided at all costs. No kidding.
What I love is that you kind of get the impression that like the glossary is information maybe that's given out to agents, not quite the Fitz manual, but like leaflets, something like that is what it feels like. It's like these ghosts should be avoided at all costs, except we're going to pay you so that you go and stab one.
Avoided at all costs, unless you're an agent.
Well, they do actually try to avoid them, don't they? They try to kind of pinpoint where the source should be, and then we'll come back in the daytime.
Well,
is what they're meant to do.
Yeah, non-reckless agents do it that way, for sure.
Yeah, Lockwood and Co does not, because they don't have supervisors telling them they're idiots.
Tell me what your source is!
Anyway, so, yeah, basically type 2s aren't always aggressive. They're not always out to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the ones that we see are, though.
Well, of course, because those are going to be the most interesting.
Yeah, those are really the cases that Lucy wants to talk about. I did mention Annabelle Ward.
Yes, what did you want to say about Annabelle Ward? Annabelle Ward is a spectre, right?
She's a spectre, yes. Which we also need to talk about in a second. But Annabelle Ward is really interesting because Lucy comes out, she goes, Annabelle Ward's repeating her death loop. Like you just said, Annabelle Ward's on her death loop. Which is interesting because Annabelle Ward was not thrown down the stairs. Unlike Robert Cook in the Hanover Square, the big stairs, the Winter Garden House. Mm-hmm. He was essentially repeating his death loop or repeating his favourite murder.
Right.
Right?
It wasn't his death loop.
Yeah, it was a highlight of his life when he murdered his servant guy.
Yeah.
He was replaying that out over and over with whoever was fool enough to cross his path. Annabelle Ward was not doing that because she was strangled to death. And her death loop that she tells to Lucy, do you remember what it is? It's not let go of me.
I do not remember what it is in the book.
I'm cold. I'm cold. I'm cold and dead.
There's no way she says that, right? There's no way she says that when she's being strangled. That is not a death loop.
Yeah, so how sentient is she? Is she our first type 3 and Lucy's perhaps just not developed her talent enough to be able to make a proper connection?
Perhaps. Or perhaps she's just a type 2 who is very aware and has a lot of intent. She wants revenge. Even then, she's cold, she doesn't want to be dead, and she wants revenge. She wants things.
And she's also very, very, very super aware because at that point when Lucy is being ghost-locked by the monks and Lucy's about to commit suicide, Annabelle Ward tries to stop her.
That's right. Doesn't she feel like a flash of...
She feels the psychic energy through the silver glass box. So Annabelle Ward is losing her mind, trying to keep her out of the well because she knows if Lucy goes down, there goes any hope of her revenge.
Right, and she'll be trapped down there forever.
Exactly.
Ah.
So, how sentient is she? Is she just a type 2? Is she a type 3? If she is just a type 2, because we do never see her actually moving things around like deliberately. She uses the spectral winds, but she doesn't actually have any precision or control over the things that she moves, unlike Skull.
Right.
Now, Skull and Ezekiel turns all the glass shards into daggers, doesn't he? He makes things very cinematic, whereas Skull's just like checking out his nails while he's waving a couch about. Yeah, she doesn't do that. She's just blowing wind all over the place.
Yeah.
So, but the line is very, very blurred.
All right, so we've talked a bit on the pod previously about hauntings spread, I think in the economics episode when we were debating, well, I wasn't there, when you guys were debating whether or not Europe was haunted.
It's not.
No, it's totally haunted. Have you seen those castles? They're totally haunted.
I mean, they might be haunted, but they're not strong enough to actually manifest and ghost touch people and cause problems.
But I want them to be.
Of course they're haunted. Everywhere's haunted. They are haunted. They're haunted even in real life.
All right, let's get into the mechanics, though, a bit more about how hauntings spread, how ghosts are formed, and how clusters formed. I think that's really interesting. So let's walk through the hauntings from the books to kind of see how they build our understanding of hauntings and ghosts and psychic energy, and how that progresses through the books, and how Stroud really built that up to give us this full picture by the time we get to the big finale and are able to save the world. So we've talked about Annabelle Ward, both in terms of her psychic connection to Lucy and kind of,
how she blurs the line between type 2s and 3s, and which kind of lets you know that this categorization is not really very precise.
Even our categories of actual real-life animals that we have to study in detail is not very precise.
Yeah.
But humans like to categorize things, so this is very much like the zoological kind of classification of ghosts. We're doing the best we can with very limited information. The fact that you see a whole bunch of specters with a whole bunch of different powers tells you that this classification system is just like, I don't know what it is, chuck it in with this group. It kind of looks like that. And now this is making me think of the bit in Coombe Carey where they're debating what kind of ghost, at least in the show, I don't know if they do this in the book.
They do.
They're debating what kind of ghost they're up against. Like, is it a poltergeist because it moved the door? No, it's just a regular changer. And
no, it's because it locked the door. It shut the door and locked the door, and a regular ghost couldn't do that. They could shut the door, but they couldn't keep it shut. Only a poltergeist would have that kind of precision.
So Coombe Carey is the first cluster that we see, and it's kind of a weird one. I think most of the clusters we see after Coombe Carey don't really follow the same pattern. The way Coombe Carey works is monks were murdered, they were sad, they're dead, they become the manifestation that is the Screaming Staircase. But then later, there's like a dinner party in the Red Room, and the monks kill a bunch of people in the Red Room, right?
No, that's not what happens.
Oh, see, I thought they killed a bunch of people in the Red Room, and then those ghosts also joined with the monks, which is now how you've got this secondary haunting in the Red Room.
No, the Red Room is the monks.
Well, it's also the monks.
The monks. Yeah, no, the Red Room is the monks. The monks are changers.
Oh, that's right. There's a bunch of shades that turn up there, too, that Lockwood's like, how did I miss them? That's what happens to the dinner guests, I guess.
Those were death glows.
Death
glows in the Red Room.
I'm just wrong about everything.
Yes. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. So what happened with Coombe Carey was, as you said, the monks were murdered. They were very distraught about that. Even that doesn't quite cover it. They were murdered. They turned into ghosts. They were quite horrifically murdered, and they were marched down the Screaming Staircase to their deaths. They knew what was going to happen. They couldn't do anything about it. And all of that trauma left a lasting psychical imprint. So, the problem starts, and it's kicking off ghosts, so then they became these very, very strong ghosts. But the thing is that psychical imprint, and perhaps the haunting itself, existed prior to the problem. It was already there. And as we've talked about before, being in close proximity to ghosts influences you. Mm. So the people who lived at Coombe Carey Hall over the centuries, many of them went mad.
That's right.
And they would do the killings. They would murder people on the stairs, commit suicide by jumping off towers. All of this, the Coombe Carey, after the monk's murder, it's just people kept dying at Coombe Carey. They weren't dying of ghost touch. They were dying by other people being violent and doing awful things. And it's implied that these people went mad during the time that they lived there, and that's why they were doing it. It's kind of a bit like The Shining,
yeah.
I think. I haven't seen The Shining.
No, it is.
But yeah. So this is the, it's the, I don't want to say it's the malaise, but, it's the psychical connection of the monks. It's their trauma casting out over everybody and casting that shadow on everyone and influencing somewhat enchainment. There we go. We see a bit more of it.
Yep.
That's what's causing all of the shades and stuff. So when the problem starts and they get that burst of psychical energy, the veil is much thinner now, so they can manifest properly and not just with the emotions or whatever influence they have before they can actually manifest as ghosts. They manifest as changers, and they mostly haunt the wing of the hall that was the original monastery. Mm-hmm. They don't really leave the confines of the original monastery, which means that that's the Red Room, because the Red Room was part of it, the Screaming Staircase, which is in the hidden part, the area with the well, and then the part of the basement that would have been part of the original monastery. Mm-hmm. All of that is where you see the monks appearing physically, either as monks or they're changers, right? So they change into plasm. That's the blood in the red room, which I suppose whatever happened there was a bit like the Red Wedding or something, with lots and lots of blood going on. Maybe that's why they chose that form when they're up there. Does it include the other ghosts from the Red Room? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either now that you've gone through it all. I do remember there are a lot of other ghosts in Cumcari.
Yes.
And those are probably all the ones that went mad over the centuries.
Well, that were killed by the ones that went mad over the
Or
centuries.
that, yes.
Yeah, so there's a lot of like shades hanging around the place. The secondary hauntings, they call them. And they were very easy to mop up once the ghosts were gone, because they were drawing most of their power and ability to manifest on this side of the veil from the psychical energy that was being put out by the monks. And the monks were unusual because they seemed to be actively working together, which we only see in one more place, and that's in Aikmir's.
Right.
But yeah, so the monks were the Red Room, the monks were the Screaming Staircase, so they were manifesting as sounds, somewhat apparitions as well, because I think she sees like the shadows all down the wall and things like that. And then the actual like form of the monk, I guess the spectre of the monk in the well room, all of those were the monks. So they were changers.
By the way, this is now you got me thinking about The Shining, because they are working together in The Shining. Like once he dies, they welcome him into their ranks of ghosts.
Oh, he dies?
And also there's like a wave of blood. So, oh yeah, spoilers for The Shining. He dies.
I've never seen it, so I didn't know.
He goes completely mad and tries to kill his wife and child, and then eventually he sits outside and freezes to death because he's completely ghost-locked, in fact. I'm going to analyze the whole Shining from the point of view of Stroud versus mechanics. I think it'll work really well.
It sounds about right, actually. I mean, it's the same kind of concept. So yeah, that's it. Like I said, we do see ghosts working together again in Aikmir's.
Yeah.
Which... it's like Cumcari, but it's bigger. Again, you had the initial very bad event which happened, which was the King's Prison, and then bricking up all those people to die. Classic Tudor empathy there. They left those people to starve to death in the dark, and that obviously left a lasting trauma. And then they added plague pits to it, and I mean, it's in Chelsea. It's in Chelsea. I'm actually not saying this to be like, look at people from Chelsea, because who the hell is from Chelsea? People move into Chelsea when they get money, okay? Nobody's from Chelsea anymore. Surely. I don't think anyone's actually from Chelsea. But Chelsea's like, it's very, very central. It's extremely central to London. London has been through it.
Yeah.
London's a very old city. We've had a lot of stuff go on. The Tudors were, the 1500s, 1600s? So that's a good 400 or 500 years of atrocities.
The plague pit would have been, the 13th century?
So the plague pit would have been before the King's Prison then.
Yeah.
So, we're going quite far back and just adding atrocity over atrocity onto atrocity.
Well, and there was a World War II bombing too, because they talk about the last time there were agents at Aikmir's, it was because there were ghosts reenacting the bombing, like falling to their deaths during the bombing.
It was wardens.
Yep.
Yeah, because we had air raid wardens during World War II, who I'm not sure what their job was really. I mean, I think they would kind of stand on top of buildings with an air horn or something and say, there are bombs coming, like people hadn't noticed. And yeah, the wardens were falling through the ceiling down to the basement because that's what happened when they got bombed. Yeah, you're adding all of this onto Aikmir's, so you've got all of this stuff. But Aikmir's, I think that you're not only seeing the secondary hauntings with the shades. I think that's so creepy, by the way. Like the shades all standing at the ends of the aisles and moving out the way when you go towards them. That's so creepy.
That reminds me very much of the Doctor Who episode, the first one of the new era with Christopher Eccleston, where they're in the mall or in the department store and
the plastics.
Yeah, because all the what do you call them? The mannequins.
The living plastic, the mannequins.
Yeah, the mannequins are moving. And that's kind of what this is, right? Except they think they're mannequins, and then it turns out they're all shades.
And it was Harrods, which is kind of what Aikmir's is sort of based off Harrods.
Oh, yeah.
But we also see the poltergeist and the fetch, and I tend to think that they're working together.
Oh, why is that?
Well, the poltergeist rips the thing apart, but it's mostly focused on Lucy. And I say this because it doesn't really seem to hinder anybody else from getting down to the circle. And like Lockwood and Kipps were above Lucy and Holly. And obviously Lucy and Holly are slowed down because they're taking Bobby, but they're not slowed down that much.
Well, Lockwood even says that once she falls through the floor, the poltergeist is like, I'm done. Wiping its hands off.
Yeah, exactly. It's ripping a hole in the floor to get down to the prison and also to stop Lucy from reaching the chains. Once Lucy gets down near the chains, it gets more frantic and it redoubles its energies. And like Lockwood gets Bobby to safety, Lockwood gets Holly to safety, and it's starting to really panic now, isn't it? Because it's trying to get Lucy. Why is it trying to get Lucy? Once Lucy hits the prison, the poltergeist stops. So the poltergeist didn't want Lucy for itself. The fetch wants Lucy. And the poltergeist is working with her.
So you think like it's the fetch's awareness and intent that is influencing how the poltergeist kind of does its business, even if it's getting its energy mainly from Lucy and her psychic energy and her anger.
I mean, the poltergeist can't be getting all of its energy from Lucy.
No.
I know Lucy's saying that she's fueling the poltergeist, and this is kind of the old school thing where, like, if you have a teenager in the house, all of their angst might kick off a poltergeist. You know, this is, you know, actual real world law, I guess. That's what people say. Or what they used to say when people used to believe in ghosts more. But I think there's no way that that particular poltergeist could be just solely fueled by Lucy, because it is so big.
Yeah, it's huge.
Skull says it is the size of the entire department store. I think that poltergeist was there regardless, and it was that strong regardless, but Lucy woke it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's going on, but because Lucy, despite having just like fought the strongest poltergeist anybody's ever seen, when she sees the fetch, it's like, this is the apparition at the heart of the Chelsea outbreak. That's what she says about the fetch. Not the poltergeist, the fetch.
The fetch is really powerful.
It is really powerful.
Even though the poltergeist
is also really powerful.
Yeah.
But the fetch is the one that's exerting the most psychic influence. So is it likely that the poltergeist is kind of working for the fetch? I think, yeah. But the poltergeist is a lot more sentient than your average shade or something like that.
The fetch has enchained the poltergeist.
I don't think it's enchained. I think it's like the monks at Coombe Carey. They're just working together.
Oh, it's just cooperative. They're buddies.
Exactly, they're buddies. The fetch wants Lucy's autograph, but the poltergeist is going to make that happen.
The fetch came up and saw Lucy and was like, I want that. And then it's like, hey, poltergeist buddy.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's chasing Lucy around the damn department store and it can't see her.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps getting close, but it can't find her. And I actually think this is, again, because Lucy's power is so big, because Skull says she shines like a beacon. Maybe it's a bit like the poltergeist itself, because they can't find the poltergeist source, because the poltergeist is so large it encompasses the entire department store, right? And the fetch can't find Lucy because her aura is so large, it's encompassing a large area, is my guess, anyway.
Interesting. All right, so if the fetch is sort of the seed of the Chelsea outbreak, and then you've got the poltergeist on top of it, and they're probably both from the prison, because especially the fetch, like it ends up back down in the prison. That seems like a comfy space for it.
Yeah.
And then you have all these other ghosts that have kind of welled up within Aikmere's. But then the way that it spreads out of Aikmere's is because it's all being amplified by Rotwell experimenting in the basement, right? They're trying to make a ghost portal circle to the other side.
Yes. And we're linking back to the Whispering Skull now, okay? Because the Whispering Skull, what nobody ever brings up is the bone glass. What's the recipe for the bone glass? Do you remember?
The 7 bones, the 7 spirits?
No, the recipe for the bone glass is 3.
Oh.
3 sources creates a window to the other side. Okay, and in the recipe, like the drawings, the guy was standing looking through the bone glass at the other side. He wasn't dead. So I think it's actually quite possible that you can make a bone glass that works in the Lockwood & Co universe, not in real world. Sorry, guys. You could make one that actually works if you stuck to the flipping recipe. But like those people who say, so I replaced all the flour with baking powder and the cake just didn't work out well, so you only get 1 star.
It exploded. Why did it do that?
Bickerstaff was like, go big or go home, baby. Gosh. I'm not doing 3. 7 is the most magically powerful number because he was channeling Voldemort there. And he went for 7. So 7 was too much. It was too much energy, and that's why it killed people. Because it's too much energy controlled and confined to too small a space. So the bone glass kind of gives you this idea it gives you 2 ideas. One kind of builds off the ghosts working together in a small space. Ghosts working together, cooperating are stronger. Mm-hmm. The sum of the total psychic output is stronger when you have more ghosts who are together. Okay? And then the bone glass is where they've actually got the sources together, and the sources together creates kind of a rift in the fabric of
I can't
reality.
help thinking of the images you get of a black hole.
Yeah.
Right? Where if you get enough energy, enough mass concentrated in a small enough space, you punch through. And that seems to be what's what's happening actually with the ghosts, right? You get enough psychical energy in one place and you punch through to the other side.
Exactly. You get all of it together, you punch through to the other side. 3 was just enough to do it safely. 7, it killed you, but it wasn't enough for you to actually go through to the other side. And I also wonder if it wasn't because the bone glass doesn't have any kind of protections in it.
Right, it doesn't have a chain.
Yeah, your spirit gates are encircled. They're, you're protected from the psychic energy. That's why you can look at it and not die.
Mm-hmm.
But the bone glass is literally nothing protecting you from it. It's just there. But luckily it's small enough that it's not going to, suck you in. So you're okay. Ish.
But then you get almost like waves coming out, right? You get gravitational waves, you get psychical energy waves coming out from this place where you've punched through, and it ripples all through and stirs up ghosts, and it provides all this psychical energy, this underlying energy. You're no longer at 0 point, you're at this kind of high level, and so then you get all the other ghosts manifesting in Chelsea.
Exactly. So Eichmere is also just quick note, but the bone glass ghosts are not repeating a death loop again. They're saying, give us back our bones.
Right.
So Lucy's narration is only type 3s can talk, and not type 2s or everything else, they just repeat their death loop. It's meaningless. It's not. They're aware. Anyway, yeah, Eichmere's, they were basically trying to make a giant bone glass in the idea that if they got more sources, they'd be able to punch all the way through. Makes sense. 3 sources is a window. 7 sources is just death. More than 7 could be a door.
Mm-hmm.
The logic's there. It makes sense. So they're obviously doing something to kind of protect themselves. But because they've got all of those sources piled up together, it's the sum. It just kind of I'm sure there's it kind of compounds, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you can have 2 ghosts in an area and their sources are nearby, and that's fine. But once you shove those sources together in a small space, you can find it more. The energy kind of builds on each other. It compounds and compounds and compounds, and then you've got that amplified by the fetch that was already there. The fetch is now stronger because it's feeding off these bones which have all been rearranged. Okay, and the shades are also stronger because the fetch is there, and the poltergeist, and and all of this psychical energy is building up. I'm using my hands here a lot, and nobody else can see it, and I'm very annoyed about this because I think, look, I talk with my hands so much, so I sound like an absolute dingus because I'm just saying all this, that, it's like this. But this because I talk with my body. Apologies. Try not to. Anyway, all of this psychical energy is building up, and as it builds up, it accumulates and it compounds upon itself and it radiates outwards, like you said. And when it radiates outwards, it triggers other hauntings. So ghosts that possibly weren't strong enough to properly pierce the veil, now that they've got the boost from this big pile, they can then break through on this side. Once it triggers other hauntings, if it happens to trigger a ghost that is quite strong or stronger, or it gives a boost to an existing ghost which was already quite strong, that ghost can then trigger other hauntings, right? It's like ripples on a pole.
Well, and as soon as you punch through somewhere else, even if it's a little pinprick punch through just from one powerful ghost, now you've got, psychical energy kind of pouring through from that. One thing I've wondered is, when we see the other side, and I think we're going to have to save talking about the other side for another time, actually, because I have to go make dinner. But when we see the ghosts on the other side, they are drawn to those other portals. Mm. But I think that if they are in a place where the veil is very thin, so to speak, I think that sort of the light and warmth of the real world of life, of the people on this side, it's more juicy, it's more tasty, and it's closer. Mm. And so they get kind of drawn through to become hauntings rather than going on in the way that they should.
See, I wonder about those portals as well, because the portals that they find in London, they're all in squares.
Yeah.
So in areas that used to be villages that built the square for the community to kind of come together. And Lucy and Lockwood don't see any when they're in the village. So there's portals. They're not everywhere on the other side. They're only in certain areas.
Yeah, they don't see it on the green. Maybe it's somewhere else. I had actually interpreted them being in the plazas as being those are community spaces, they're gathering spaces, but they're also at a crossroads.
Yeah.
It's a place of travel and movement and moving on and that sort of thing.
Hmm. And I assume there must be a way to kind of bypass the whole other London thing as well, because other London, the other side feels a bit like purgatory in a way, doesn't it? It's just
Dark
nothing.
London.
Dark London, yeah, it's nothing, it's empty, and then you move through the portals onto a brighter beyond.
I mean, you're probably supposed to do that very fast. You're not supposed to spend any time in Dark London, and only a soul that's really weighed down, to use Egyptian mythology. That's really weighed down, isn't able to move on.
That would make more sense to me.
All right, so that's really all the time we have for today, because otherwise I'm going to get children and a husband and my parents all jumping on me saying, where's our dinner?
Anyway, I had lots of fun being really nerdy with you, Lizzie.
Yes, we should do this again. There's no one here to tell us we can't, or to look really bored with glazed eyes as we go into the really deep mechanics. And since Meg isn't here, I have to plug our socials, which I've never done before. So if you have questions, I don't know, send them to us. We'd love to hear from you.
There is a comment option underneath this on Spotify. I don't know if Apple is that advanced yet.
I don't know. I think there is. Yeah, there's ways to comment on the podcast. You can also find our website, our Tumblr. Look, listen to an episode that Meg is on, and you can listen to her give the whole spiel.
We also, like we said, we have a website. Everything's linked on there. I was going to say something, and I have completely forgotten it. Oh, if you have time, go back to the Ezekiel episode and vote on the poll, because May rigged the voting, so I'm losing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not surprised I'm losing, because I took like the middle path between you, and it's just not that interesting. So I don't mind if I don't come out on top with that one.
I mean, I thought that I was like genuinely losing, and then Mairead admitted to voter fraud.
Not fair at all. All right, I do think we should start a whole nerdy mini-series on hauntings and ghost mechanics, and I don't know, we'll talk more about timelines. We'll find a way.
Yes! I mean, Lizzie actually did the equation to work out how a timeline for season 2 would work given the timelines that we were shown in season 1. As in the fact that, like, they compressed those 2 books into about 8 days, so what would the Hollow Boy look like?
Yeah.
So, we want to get into this nerdy stuff. I'm not going to say, do you want us to? We're going to do it.
Yeah, this is for us. I don't care if nobody listens. Honestly, we started this podcast. One of my main things was because you and I used to send voice messages back and forth. And at some point I was like, this should just be a podcast. All this like really deep discussion of the mechanics and why does Lucy do this and why does Skull and yeah. All right. Next time.
And now it is. Well done.
Yeah. Yes. Success.
It's all your fault. Yeah.
All right. So from all 2 of us at Haunting the Narrative, until next time. Bye.
Have a lovely one. Bye.